This video will cover much of what students have to know for the Civil War test. Before the Civil War began, Southern soldiers were more experienced with using firearms and riding horses than were Northerners. At the beginning of the Civil War, Southerners had revolutionary zeal. At the beginning of the Civil War, not even the North accepted African Americans to fight in the war. The only way women could fight in the Civil War was if they disguised themselves as men. During the 1850s, when talking to Europeans, President Abraham Lincoln was embarrassed that the U.S. still permitted slavery since it had already been banned by Britain, France, and other countries. Habeas corpus is Latin for meaning that the government must have a body of evidence of a crime that someone committed, otherwise they could not detain a citizen. Lincoln justified suspending habeas corpus, in other words, the Bill of Rights, during the Civil War because he was willing to violate the Constitution in order to save the nation. An excerpt from Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address in 1863, after the Union had just defeated the Confederates' invasion of Gettysburg, which was a last-ditch effort by the Confederacy to have a chance to win the war. Once they lost the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, they pretty much had no chance to win the war. Even though it took them 2 years after that to finally surrender, they were pretty much decimated after the Battle of Gettysburg, and they were basically running on fumes for the last 2 years of the Civil War. And an excerpt from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address in 1863 was, "The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here." Of course, he was wrong about that. The world very much noted what he said, and to this day, it's taught around the world. Lincoln is talking about the soldiers who fought at the Battle of Gettysburg, even from the South, as he wants to reunify the nation. Lincoln was pretty gracious toward the South. He allowed the Southern soldiers to keep a horse and at least one firearm each after the war was over. So he truly did want to take them back under the fold of the nation. General Ulysses Grant captured Vicksburg, Mississippi, with a blockade and constant shelling of the city, cutting off the food supply and forcing them to live in caves. This could be illustrated in the classic movie Gone with the Wind from 1938. General McClellan was relieved of duty after failing repeatedly to follow President Lincoln's order to destroy the rebel army. McClellan was just too cautious, he was unaggressive, and that's why he was eventually replaced by the much more aggressive Ulysses S. Grant. Civil War political cartoonist Thomas Nast created the following American caricatures still popular today: the Republican elephant, the Democratic donkey, the image of Uncle Sam, and the image of Santa Claus. Nast was a very popular cartoonist during the Civil War. After anti-slavery crusader John Brown took over Harper's Ferry, Virginia, now it's called West Virginia, but at the time was Virginia, in 1859, and after Brown killed some Southern slave owners, he was captured by the U.S. Marines under the command of Colonel Robert E. Lee and hanged. He became a hero and a martyr to many in the North. The Battle of Bull Run, located in Manassas Junction, Northern Virginia, was fought by Northern armed mobs who were badly defeated by Confederate soldiers under General Stonewall Jackson on July 21, 1861, very early on in the Civil War. The only U.S. president who ever had his own official holiday declared by the U.S. government was George Washington, not Lincoln, contrary to popular belief. During the Civil War, the Union Army had a very difficult time defeating Cherokee leader Stand Watie, who was fighting for the Confederacy, who promised to give the Cherokees some of their land back in their original Cherokee Nation located in Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina. But this never happened, as since the Confederacy lost the Civil War, the Cherokees never got any of their land back to this day. The Battle of Antietam, which was in Sharpsburg, Maryland, just 4 miles away from the Potomac River, was the bloodiest in American history when more than 23,000 soldiers died in one day. General Grant won this key battle by cutting off the southern city of Vicksburg, Mississippi's food supply, and forcing them to move into caves in order to survive the constant shelling. One of the questions that students will be given is that John Brown was so opposed to slavery that he and a group of his followers murdered 5 Southern slave masters. And one of the questions students will research would be, did John Brown use an effective method to fight slavery? Although many Native American tribes helped the North in the Civil War, who helped the Union win the war, were rewarded by having much of their land returned to them. A city called Lumberton, North Carolina was named after the Lumbee tribe, who helped the North win the Civil War. They helped Sherman get back north after he blazed a swath of destruction through Georgia from Atlanta all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And if it was not for the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina to help him to navigate the swamps to get back north to defeat the Confederate Army in Virginia, the North would have had a much more difficult time to closing out the South in the war. More Americans died in the Civil War than in any other American war in history. Students will research these numbers, as these numbers could vary based upon the source. But it's roughly 250,000 Confederate soldiers died and about 500,000 from the Union. So for every Confederate soldier that died, there was 2 Union soldiers who died, between 2 and 3, roughly. Southern slaves were forced by their masters at gunpoint to dig trenches to protect the Confederate soldiers from attacks by the Union Army. And that's all for this video. Thank you. Bye.